Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to our ATD Houston webinar this afternoon, Enhancing Employee Training and Enablement in a Mobile World. We have our speaker with us today, Greg Ryan from Inkling. He's a solution consultant sales representative. The description of our webinar today is Business Content Powers Mission Critical Tasks in Marketing, Operations, Sales, HR, and anywhere else knowledge is needed. But traditional approaches generate content that's flat, can't be measured, and can't easily be protected. It's time for a new approach to content that drives the modern mobile enterprise. And so some of the objectives that we have lined out for our session this afternoon is to learn how to adapt traditional training and enablement methods to empower a millennial and mobile workforce, and then learning how you can easily turn static training materials into interactive, engaging content that can be tracked and measured. And Greg will be helping us with that. A couple housekeeping items. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please drop them into the question window that we'll see those come through on our end. You can also raise your hand. We can unmute your microphone if you would like to speak and ask your question. That would be awesome. We are recording the session today, so if you hear anything appealing or you might miss something or want to share something with others later, that should get posted up on the ATD Houston website at some point after the webinar. So with that, let me introduce you to Greg Ryan with Inkling. And Greg, I'll go ahead and throw up our first poll question while you're talking so people can answer that while you're introducing yourself.
Excellent. Sure. So Ken, thanks so much. Folks, Greg Ryan, as Ken said, I'm one of the solutions consultants that works here at Inkling. We're a San Francisco-based company, kind of in startup mode. We've just recently somewhat changed our direction. We started in kind of the academic textbook world, and we're now taking all of the lessons, the lumps and bruises, if you will, and applying that to enhancing corporate training. Going to be going over today kind of a discussion about training for the modern mobile enterprise. Number of different things that we want to cover. As far as an agenda is actually concerned, pretty simple. Really want to start out with kind of two converging forces or two catalysts that without which I don't believe that we would actually be in business. Then kind of go over some success stories with some of our customers, demonstration of our platform, and then after that, I have some time dedicated to Q&A.
And Greg, you can see our first poll question here. How many of you offer at least one company device for employees? We had 100% of the people said that they provided that, and so we have this second question that I can launch here about what mobile devices does your company issue? And so you can choose all of those that apply. So we're seeing the results come in now. It looks like everybody is getting a laptop these days. Everybody's getting a smartphone these days. Half the people say tablet. So it seems like laptop and smartphone are standard for everybody. There we got another person voted in 67% tablet. So the tablets are on the rise too.
So this is actually about what we're seeing. Quite commonplace, of course, for still having a laptop. It's kind of the primary content generation device, right? The cell phones is not surprising. Quite a few folks are not overly comfortable having personal devices managing corporate content, right? Kind of a security request from IT or various security groups. The tablet piece is actually also quite interesting. I think if we had asked that question about 5 years ago, the answer would probably have been about 0%. Those are on the rise because people are starting to see the value that that level of portability and power combined in that sort of a mobile device is really affecting how people are getting their job done. We're going to talk about mobility as one of these converging forces, if you will, and how that's changing things. And it's everything from personal lives to what we're doing professionally. And if I don't highlight it, there's actually a great stat that says folks are actually using portable devices not only in lieu of, but also alongside their sanctioned PCs, desktops, laptops, even while they're at work, rather than just while they're traveling, which is an interesting development. Ken, anything else that you need us to cover, or anything else that you'd suggest we jump into before we actually start the presentation?
No, why don't you go ahead, and then once we're done here at the end of the presentation, I'll share some ATD Houston information at a wrap up.
Okay, very cool. So, folks, to begin with, there's a phrase that's being used, and it's kind of referring to us currently being in this concept of a knowledge economy. It's not so much the products that we're generating, but that is becoming more and more critical that corporations appropriately utilize knowledge to differentiate and be successful in an ever more competitive market. And here's the challenge. Knowledge is actually pretty hard. It's messy, right? And every individual, every human brain actually processes knowledge differently. This gets more complex with training. When you're training employees, how can you tell if the knowledge that you're trying to impart is being impactful? How can you tell if it's being retained? And I think the goal that we've been able to identify is that corporations want to have a system that's able to deliver feedback in a closed-loop manner so that you automatically know what's working, what's not, what people are using on a regular basis, things like that.
Greg, Patty had asked if I'm sorry to interrupt you, Greg, but Patty had asked if you could speak up a little bit. She said your volume is a little low on her end. And Patty, I don't know if you can raise your volume if you've already tried that on your computer. That might help too.
Yeah, no worries. Can you all hear me okay if I go like this? Hopefully that's a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to speak a little bit closer to the microphone. So I remember the first job that I had as a consultant at Oracle. They actually gave me massive printed compendiums of information, everything from implementation guides, best practice documentation, troubleshooting guides. If I remember correctly, it was somewhere between like 8 and 10 or maybe a dozen 2-inch binders worth of printed material. In one respect, this was great because it was quite comprehensive. There were a few times where I couldn't find the answer that I was looking for out of here. It was by far the exception, right? The challenge of that, though, is it is, first and foremost, it's horribly expensive, right? Printing is still expensive now, and it was a little bit more expensive back then, I'm sure. And it wasn't just printing it once, but what I was supporting, what I was consulting on, was constantly being updated. So new versions of this information were being published on a regular basis, meaning that they're going to be reprinted, they're going to be shipped, and they're going to be sent out, right? It wasn't overly searchable. Indexed, table of contents, appendices. We had those options, but it's not intuitive, right? I much prefer a Google search rather than trying to figure out where content is manually. And lastly, it certainly wasn't something that I was going to bring on site with me. So as reference material at my desk, I think it was functional, but there was certainly room to improvement. Now, hopefully this isn't overly familiar at your companies, but what we're actually seeing is that most organizations, unfortunately, still rely heavily on printed documentation. And here's the kicker. Employees tend not to want this. The vast majority of the content that we're exposed to on a regular basis is, in fact, digital. But training, which generates arguably the most critical content with regard to how someone actually does their job, is still entrenched in the inefficient process of printing documentation. On average, and this was a study conducted by an organization called eMarketer, we're seeing an almost 10-to-1 ratio for employees accessing digital versus print content. And because of the inefficiencies associated with hard copy content, most training material is viewed only a few times and never looked at again. Fortunately, this can be addressed by the next catalyst, which is mobility. We'll take a look at a second at some of the absolutely insane numbers as far as what's going on in this space. But let's think for a moment about how mobile phones in particular have actually changed the ways in which we communicate. I know that I certainly do, and I think most of us actually live on these devices. We regularly have them next to us as we're going to sleep, and they're the first thing that we check when we get up, right? And it's not just the phone aspect. It's email, it's text messaging, it's accessing files, occasionally maybe even Facebook. Who knows? At least most of which can now certainly be done for business purposes on your mobile device. So, I'd even go as far as to say that right now there might be some of you who are watching this webinar on a tablet as we speak. As an amusing aside, last week I gave a presentation to a gentleman who he called in on a cell phone and was watching my WebEx on his iPad. What was cool, though, is that this was all done from the back of the Uber car that he was using as he went to his next appointment. I think it's fair to say he was a rather busy biotech CEO out of Louisiana, but the fact is that we're no longer tethered to our desk to get our job done. He's being productive, even in areas where previously he might not have been able to be as effective. And I think it warrants a brief history lesson here. The mobile phone's actually gone through some amazing changes, and it highlights exactly how amazing our times are right now. As I went in and searched for images of older mobile phones, I realized I actually have owned each one of these devices. My first BlackBerry had the little roller ball on the side and the keypad that even to this day I absolutely miss. And allowed us to do emails on our phone, right? How awesome was that? And of course, Pong, as an amusing aside. My Razor I had as one of my first personal cell phones. I think I could text at about 15 words a minute, which I think was pretty impressive, given the alphanumeric keypad that it had and no keyboard. And then, of course, out came the iPhone, and that changed absolutely everything by introducing the concept of a truly mobile device rather than just a cell phone. Now, the devices we have today are obviously much more advanced, right? Your cell phone is probably more powerful than the laptop that you had 3 or 4 years ago for work. And to kind of put this in perspective, they just released a 6th version, but the Galaxy S5, which was one of the Samsung phones, was about 10 times as powerful, processor-wise, as the IBM supercomputer Deep Blue that beat the chess champion Garry Kasparov a couple years back. Not to say that our phones are necessarily better at chess than Deep Blue. In fact, I think you could easily argue the other way. But in sheer processing power, they're amazing. To put this another way, take a moment to recognize that the phone in your pocket is considerably more powerful than the supercomputers that were used to map the human genome just a few years back. So this isn't being lost on consumers. It's not being lost on employees or customers. The projected utilization of personal computers, as you can see here, has somewhat plateaued, whereas utilization of smartphones and tablet devices is increasing dramatically. Our assessment is basically that content providers that are exclusively or even primarily focusing on delivering content to PCs or print are going to have limited value to present organizations going forward, and likely struggle or maybe even go the way of Radio Shack and Blockbuster. With companies now supporting BYOD policies, not only, of course, providing devices, but also allowing folks to bring their own devices to work, mobile devices are being used not only in our personal lives, but also in the professional ones. And I know I'm guilty of this first data point here. In fact, I'm probably an outlier on the right side of this bell curve. But aside from breathing and blinking, there's not much that we actually now do more in a day than check our cell phones. Executives are regularly considered one of the slowest demographics to embrace change, but now they have a 90% penetration rate as far as mobile utilization for work. And that number, as you would expect, of course, is going up. I think by far the most entertaining fact here is that people aren't just using mobile devices out of convenience when they travel, but they're using mobile devices either alongside or in lieu of their laptops and desktops at work. And of course, these metrics are a bit skewed by baby boomer and older generation Xer demographics. If we take those two out, we're looking at almost 100% pretty much across the board for all of this. So I'll pause there any questions or comments, or Ken, and any feedback that we'd like to address before I jump on to the success stories?
One question about digital text versus print text. Have you read any studies or research on that? I was just talking to a colleague a few weeks ago at the United States Distance Learning Association conference, and she was telling me some interesting things about how the human brain seems to connect closer with tactile book versus
Yep.
on a mobile device. I didn't know if you had any info on that.
No, there are absolutely studies that have gone over that. It's more, it's easier to associate with something that you have in your hand and that is requiring kind of that interaction to physically turn the page. It activates some centers in the brain that are tied to memory. It's these kind of minute motor activities that are just increasing your brain activity, and that can increase retention. We actually have a few things built into our technology that will address exactly that. Compared to just a flat, a PDF file or a Word document, absolutely. I would prefer reading a book than reading an ebook online. What we do to combat this, though, is we actually add interactive elements. It could be as simple as something like hitting play to watch a movie, which is awfully hard to do if you're looking at something in print, or even as far as introducing concepts like flashcards, where somebody can actually work on their retention in the publication itself, to quizzes, to slideshows. I mean, we've got a number of cool things that we'll take a look at in just a bit, but absolutely, that's part of what we've learned coming from academia. To combat the lack of tactile interaction, we actually add interactive elements into what it is that we publish.
Right. Yeah, I was surprised because that's the first time I'd heard that, and she had obviously done a lot of research on it, and I had the same thought. I was thinking, well, in a digital format, you could, and again, I was thinking probably what you were just saying about PDF ebooks and things. I was thinking it might just be that people aren't using the digital content for what it could be, because digitally you could really dive deeper into something.
Yep.
And kind of manipulate it in a way that you can't do with a book. And I think I made that comment to her, and she said, yeah, the problem is people are basically just taking the book and PDFing it, so it's a digital version, and then you're losing that tactile piece.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the first time that you went to a newspaper website versus the newspaper, and suddenly you see audio clips, video clips, you can search throughout the content. That level of engagement is in fact elevated compared to what you have in the printed version of that document, right? It might be the same content, but your experience is elevated in a number of different ways. And unlike newspapers, we tend not to put ads in what it is that we publish, so it's actually it's pretty positive across the board. But great point, right? And that all ties into the fact that we're now introducing new mediums of content consumption. So in this particular environment, with the introduction of mobile devices and the meteoric rise of their utilization, we're finding that there's an amazing opportunity for us to take information and deliver it in a much more engaging manner. Systems before the change to a heavily mobile-focused workforce were designed for computers, right? Making the jump from computer-centric to mobile-centric is hard, or in some cases actually impossible. And if you try looking at SharePoint or a PDF document on an iPhone, you'll actually know exactly what I mean. Things designed for computer screens and print normally don't translate too well to mobile devices, unfortunately. So it posed an interesting problem, which was, how do we go about delivering time-sensitive and beautiful content in a world where people would rather be on their tablets and phones than their computer? And fortunately, this is exactly what Inkling solves. We do this with some great brands. Our mission is actually pretty simple. We want to make the world a smarter place by finding better ways to share knowledge. As mentioned, our background is kind of in the world of academia, of knowledge transfer and measurement. And we really started by trying to kind of reimagine the textbook. In fact, there's a good chance if any of you have school-aged children and they're in a textbook-free environment, that they're already using our software and simply don't know it because our customers are rebranding it as their own delivery engine. If y'all just think back to college, I'm sure you would agree that it's actually a rather Herculean effort to ensure that students understand the rather complex material that's presented to them as they're going out to college. Once we conquered that, we made the decision as an organization to go after a set of content that, at least in general, is a little bit less complex than what the average med student has to endure, that being content in the realm of corporate training and enablement. On the plus side, this content appears pretty much everywhere, right? From groups that are customer-facing to operations, sales, learning and development, and even IT, we're providing a platform that is both easily distributing gorgeous mobile content and easy to author this content. We work with sales teams who want to carry iPads into customer calls. We work with training groups who want to engage and delight with informative and beautiful content. And we work with operations teams who want to make sure that their field staff is up to date with the latest and greatest policies or corporate information. In particular, I've got a few case studies. To give a bit more of a granular example here, we work with a major medical manufacturing company named Covidian. They actually had a very simple request. They wanted us to help them send product information to iPads. They were in the process of rolling out and trying to embrace a mobile strategy, and this was going to be a huge win for one of their VPs. Cost was not an issue. Repurposing their print and ship budget paid for the actual investment in technology many, many times over. And it was interesting when we were able to actually tell the vice president of one of their groups that his new product overview material was going to be in his rep's hands in 3 days rather than 3 months. You actually get a prolonged hug from an executive that you weren't expecting at all. This was kind of a game changer for them. Comcast became a customer of ours through their operations group. They have a massive workforce that's constantly in flux, and their focus was simply to reduce the cost of onboarding new employees. We achieved this. Again, here we saw the savings on printing more than pay for the solution that we provided. But what we didn't expect was a massive reduction in the onboarding time requirement for new employees. When there's an 80% turnover rate in just over 18 months, getting an extra 6 weeks out of productive employee time is actually huge and quite directly impacted their bottom line. The last customer that we'll go over here, this is probably one of my favorite customers, certainly one that I spend quite a bit of time with, and a rather large portion of my income goes to fund my caffeine addiction there. Starbucks was shipping and printing material to over 21,000 locations worldwide, and we helped them stop that. We made the content more engaging, and we allowed for the delivery to both internal employees as well as customers in stores with a single asset. And again, as you probably guessed, this project was more than funded by the former printing and shipping costs. And folks, when we jump to the demonstration, we'll actually be looking at a copy of one of the live products that Starbucks built with Inklink. And we'll in fact take a look at their Tivana Book of Teas that you see as samples up here. So one thing that we see time and time again is that the current process looks something like this. Lots of disparate applications to create content, challenges with solutions for distribution, and severely limited to no measurement in place. I'm sure this is familiar to some of the folks on the phone. Probably the most common process in generating content is Microsoft Word, printing to PDF, and then distributing that via print or email, possibly. Large portion of companies also distribute via intranet sites or employee portals. And the challenge with both distributions obviously becomes access and usability, both of which can be resolved by focusing the delivery of this sort of content over mobile devices. And one of the key things that we'll focus on is the glaring lack of auditability on how content is being used. Authors of this content rarely have insight into how what they're creating is actually helping the organization, aside from like the surveying, which unfortunately can provide quite biased feedback, as I'm sure you all have seen, especially from, say, new employees who are regularly just excited to be employed and unlikely to give any negative or constructive feedback. They're kind of there happy, just saying everything's the best that they've ever seen before and things like that. Inkling actually solves this particular challenge with one piece of software. The platform takes a holistic approach to the content lifecycle, from authoring, distribution, consumption, and measurement. Every aspect of content is maintained and monitored within Inkling, and that's exactly what we're going to take a look at in the demonstration coming up. So for that, super quick agenda, we're going to take a look at kind of both sides of this platform, one being the end user environment where we're going to see absolutely gorgeous content from Starbucks on an iPad, and then we'll take a quick look at the authoring environment where I'll show you how we create and edit, review, and publish this information. Folks, before I jump in, any other questions or any other comments so far?
I haven't seen anything else come through with the chat, and I know I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit about how the Inkling resources work.
Very cool. All right, so let me jump out of here. All right. So can you all see my iPad that I'm broadcasting now to my computer? Ken, is that coming across now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so folks, this is actually pretty simple. We'll highlight some features again just from the end user perspective, and think of this as the trainees, customers, employees, what have you. This is for folks that are going to be consuming the training content that we're going to be creating. Nothing special here. It's an iPad Air. I've got my Inkling application installed in the top left corner. And when I log into this, I have my credential saved, so my login and password have been entered, and we have the option of saving that. If y'all have security requirements as far as employees gaining access to systems like this, of course, we can integrate with single sign-on systems. But basically, once I log in, whatever that process looks like, I see all of the assets that I myself should have access to here. So you see the Tivana Book of Teas, all of the other books that I have downloaded to my device, and this is actually pretty cool. If I don't have an internet connection, I can still see everything here. Everything will load from text, images, videos, you name it. And then, of course, I also have a library down below where I have many, many more assets that I haven't downloaded necessarily to this device. So let's take a look real quick into the Tivana Book of Teas. This is actually pretty cool. What we have is a few things that are immediately being displayed. So on the left side, you can see these different colored icons where you have, what's new, introduction, white tea, green tea, etc. These are chapters of a book. They're simple categories, right? This can be by product, this can be by service, this can be by any sort of criteria that y'all would want this to be. So there might be in an onboarding book, how to contact HR for additional questions, kind of a walkthrough process. That could be its own section. Conversely, how to submit a request for IP support. You could have this by division of organization if you were so inclined. But the idea is simple. Make this a logical categorization so that folks can go, oh, cool, I want to see something about white tea. I click on this. I see all of these now individual topics or pages if we stay kind of within the book and chapter paradigm. I'm able to go in and say, okay, cool, look at this. So if I wanted to learn about Earl Grey white tea, I click on that, and here is the beautiful Earl Grey page that Starbucks has put together. I'm sorry, Earl Grey white tea page that Starbucks has put together. A few things right off the bat. If I swipe to the right, so kind of like going back, it shows me the previous set of pages that I saw. If I swipe to the right again, it brings me back to that list of chapters. If I go to this page and I start navigating down to the different teas that this blends great with, I click on Lavender Dreams. If I scroll down again and then click on Citrus Lavender Sage, if I now start swiping right, it actually follows the browsing path rather than taking me to the list of individual pages of those chapters. And so really we're just watching this interaction, right? We know that they're navigating not from the pages or chapters that we saw before, but from the actual content. when they want to go back, it's likely to the previous page rather than see this list. Of course, if they ever wanted to get that list up, they could just hit that back arrow, and everything represents itself pretty intuitively. The design here is very crisp, it's clean, it's entirely controlled by Starbucks. The limitation that we put on what you could put into this sort of an asset is what could you build into a web page, right? So pictures, text, tables. If I go back, I believe we have a YouTube video that streams in the middle of this asset. Starbucks already had this out. They are not anticipating any sort of requirement for offline access. For YouTube, if you're online, you can hit play and this will play beautifully. If you, in fact, upload a video to our servers in the actual authoring environment, what happens is that we can allow for that to be downloaded for offline access as well. So if you have folks that are going to be out in the field, not have Wi-Fi connection or not have cell connection, we can still work with that. It's not a big deal. A few other things we've gone over, kind of the interactivity as far as linking to other pages. One critical element of this whole setup is the fact that this format, the look and feel, the colors, the fonts, the sizing, the actual layout of the page as far as the order is all managed by folks who might not in fact be the subject matter experts. You kind of have templaters that are going to work alongside the experts who will in fact fill in all this information. But what's cool is that your SMEs don't need to worry about, am I using the right font size? Am I using the right color? Am I putting this in the right place? As we will take a look at in just a second, the authoring environment makes this incredibly intuitive, make sure that they're putting not only the right information, but maintaining things like brand and consistency of the actual layout. So when you take a look at a page on the white teas, Earl Grey white, and then jump to a green tea, a matcha tea, the layout, the look and feel is all very, very similar, right? So cool. The last thing that I'll highlight here, and hopefully this is pretty intuitive, is our search capability. What I'm going to do is do a quick search for a tea that would have low tannins, right? So I search for low tannin, and I'm immediately presented with a search result of a tea called Golden Monkey. Now, if I click on this, a couple things happen. First off, I'm not at the top of the page, right? I'm down, I'm kind of in context of wherever this particular term is first displayed. And here you can see we've highlighted it. So here you see this tea is surprisingly low in tannins, yet rich in flavor. Now, that isn't exactly what I searched for, right? I didn't search for low in tannins, I searched for low tannin. We have a relatively identifying search engine that basically goes in and says, hey, you search for this particular term, it's like this, let's display this as a potential result. And then, of course, on top of that, put the user in the right spot on the page, make it obvious as far as what it is that he or she is looking for. This is cool, maybe not overly necessary in something as simple as a product catalog like this, but if you have an asset that is meant to be used as a reference guide or reference documentation, and you have thousands and thousands of pages and more technical verbiage than you can shake the proverbial stick at, this is a huge benefit. For all the internal assets that I have access to, actually pretty similar to what I've always had access to, implementation guides, best practices, troubleshooting. Basically, when I'm looking for something, I simply go, I conduct a search, and 99 times out of 100, I find it immediately, which is great. And of course, that search capability also provides kind of a quick little overview of, hey, on this page, this is the context of low in tannins. And then you can say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Move on to the next possible search result. So that's pretty much it from the end user perspective. The intention is, again, to be very simple. If there's any familiarity with ebooks or EPUBs, if you've used a Kindle or a Nook reader before, this is designed to be incredibly intuitive. Zero training approach, if you will, because after all, we can offer training for employees, but sometimes a little bit more difficult if we're pushing this as content that is customer facing. But we find that ability to use this, adoption rates are pretty much off the chart. It's crazy easy as long as somebody's comfortable on tablets. They can pretty much use this, or mobile devices as well, of course. So folks, any questions here, or Ken, any comments that you'd like me to address before I jump to the authoring side?
I don't think so. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm going to leave my tablet here, and what I've done is I've opened up the Starbucks asset. It's the exact same publication, now just from the authoring side. So a few quick things. Our authoring environment is entirely web-based, so there's nothing that installs on anybody's computer. It's also meant to be utilized by folks who have a Microsoft Word level proficiency with computers. No coding is necessary. You do not need to know HTML5, you do not need to know cascading style sheets or JavaScript to do any of this. Now for templaters who are going to be building out kind of the look and feel and developing the actual format, those skills help. But even there, you can probably get quite a bit done without any sort of coding capabilities necessary. What we are generating at the end of this, for anyone who's interested, is in fact very clean and universally readable HTML5 and CSS. Interactivity, as we'll take a look at in a second, is managed through JavaScript. There's not a current generation device that can't handle these technologies. It's universal. Think about, assume it's the equivalent of like English in communication here in the States, or English and Spanish, or okay, maybe English, Spanish, and French, depending where you are. But you get the idea. It's very simple, and everything can render this appropriately. And that's cool because it actually allows us to go in and have this appear right and beautifully on multiple devices. In fact, one of the cool things that we do is we actually go in and say, before I publish, I want to see what all of this will look like on different types of devices. So tablets in a landscape format. If I wanted to change this to a portrait format, you can see it kind of elongates and reduces the width. If I go to a mobile device, this is a massive change because, again, we're adjusting for the resolution on these devices. In a portrait view versus a mobile device in a landscape view versus what this looks like on a web page. Basically, we're able to very easily reformat for what we know is going to be different resolutions, different perspectives on these multiple endpoint devices. We can do that in kind of the preview view, as you see here, kind of thumbnails. Or if I go back to our Earl Grey white page, if I wanted to see what this looks like in a mobile portrait view, it's just realigning all of this information appropriately so that it still looks beautiful, it renders appropriately, and it's incredibly legible on this sort of a device. As far as actually editing, it's again that Microsoft Word level proficiency. It's very simple. If I wanted to go in and add light and refreshing, let's change that to refreshing and light. Very simple. All I'm going to do is go refreshing and light. I think that was a lowercase one there. And I move on. I click to where I want to make my changes. It's aware of what it is that I'm clicking on. So if I wanted to change brewing instructions to instructions for brewing, I can do that. As we mentioned, the look and feel here is entirely managed by the folks who are responsible for branding or marketing, whatever the case may be. If we give authors the abilities, they can in fact add their own elements. So we refer to the elements as kind of these patterns that we have over on the right side. If I wanted to add a text element or a paragraph, whatever you want to call it, I drag it onto the page. I'm just holding this down with my mouse. Where I see that green bar appears where this particular element will be when I drop it. And now I can start typing my next paragraph. If I wanted to, I could get a little bit fancier. I could drop an image. This image is very easily changeable. All I'm going to do is go to my desktop, grab a quick infographic, and have this upload to the server. Now I have my image perfectly formatted, the right proportions for this page, again, based on what the template allows. I can go in, I can add a caption if I was so inclined. If I want to take a quick look as to what this looks like on a mobile device, rather than on how the formatting would be on a web page, it's just going to fall in line. It's going to look great on iPhones, Android devices, BlackBerry devices, Windows phones, what have you. So all real simple. If I wanted to add a video, as you saw on kind of the introduction page, let me describe this changes real quick. If I wanted to add a video, it's the exact same idea. I've got videos, I can change this. With videos, I can either upload the video, I can enter a URL, or I can select from a library of videos that can be managed very easily for your authors. And it's all really simple. Elements can be, or the patterns that we have here can be custom made. So if you have a look and feel for white tea, kind of the gray background that we have here, black tea, green tea, you can see that that changes for the individual pages. So if we go back to Earl Grey, you have your white tea color scheme, if you will. And then if I go to a green tea page, now we have our green color scheme. Slight differences, but important to the brand that Starbucks obviously is quite best in maintaining. As far as interactive elements go, we have a few that are out of the box. And again, these are completely customizable patterns. Y'all can add as many or just use the ones that we provide. JavaScript, which any web designer or anybody who is technically inclined should be able to, if not already know, very easily pick up, basically drives this interactivity. And Ken, this is in fact what we were talking about before. How do we actually engage in these kind of like micro interactions in a manner that allows somebody to increase that retention? Multiple choice questions, I think, are one of the best ones that we have. This is a way to instantly check if somebody's actually retaining this content. Now, if we wanted to get fancy and have these sorts of results pumped into an LMS for tracking purposes, we certainly can. But going in and editing these, like everything else in the authoring environment, is meant to be incredibly simple. If I wanted to ask a quick question like, do people prefer milk in their gray tea? Now I can make it as simple as a yes, no. We'd obviously cater this for the actual content that we have here. And if we have this sort of information being presented in a classroom setting for instructor-led training or whatever the case may be, one great option that we have is this option to shuffle choices. If you have multiple options, right, if you had A, B, C, D, these will appear in random order so that if someone's trying to borrow the answers that somebody else in class has and they put B for number 2, there's only a 1 in 4 shot that that's in the correct spot. Right.
It looks like you can add some multimedia content there too. Is it just static pictures, or can you also add like a video clip? Is the question?
Yep. Every element you could put on a web page can be injected into these particular widgets that we see here. So if it was watch this video and answer this question, if it was select out of these images the right one, I mean, the limitation is truly what you could put on a website, and beyond that, it's what you can come up with. So fully configurable. Great question. Great question there. Once we have our question here, it's easy to see what this would look like, of course, again, on a website versus on a mobile device. If we select the answer, this is that micro interaction, right? I click on something. I'm not just skimming this, or I'm not just reading it over. I click on this and I go, oh, cool, I'm right. I got this. And we see that exact interaction there drastically improves retention, which is cool, and what these are in fact designed to assist with. If somebody goes in and puts the wrong answer, also that immediate feedback. If you all want it to be something different between green check marks and red X's, all configurable. It's up to you guys. Again, if you can put it on a website, you can put it in here. The authoring environment, again, is meant to be quite intuitive, not necessarily the same level of ease as the reading environment. Your folks that are going to be here, though, are going to be your subject matter experts working on the content side, and then your templaters working on kind of the structure side, and obviously working together, but making this as easy of an experience as possible for those who are actually going to be editing the content that you have here. One other cool thing that we have is we don't necessarily only have customers that are creating something and publishing, right? There's quite often a review process, and this is pretty cool. We keep this all in context. So let's say I wanted somebody to take a quick look at this. I can add a comment. I can assign this to the appropriate resource. So let's say that it's Jason, that I need to review this, and I can say, is this the right wording? Now, my counterpart, Jason, is just received an email. He's probably confused why I'm asking him about wording in a demo environment. I'll deal with that interaction a little bit later. But what's cool is that it's all self-contained, right? I'm not generating a PDF or a Word document, sending it to Jason, waiting on that response back, and then moving on to the next step. Or worse, I could send a version of content out to multiple folks at once, and then try to figure out how to aggregate all those responses back into the master copy. As soon as he logs in, he sees the current version. If somebody else logs in at the same time, we actually notify them, hey, there's somebody else working on this. That way we're kind of avoiding those version conflicts. Additionally, once he completes this, he comes in, he can change this very easily to a closed status. It kind of removes itself from the list of active comments. In theory, upon all of these being completed, or at least all of these being resolved, a user can then go, I'll describe those changes. A user can then go with the appropriate rights, and obviously this is a right that we would keep only for the highest level folks involved in this process. But somebody can go and publish and push this out to as many endpoints as is appropriate with a single click. Literally, it's the click, build, and publish to web and both mobile. When Starbucks goes through the review process of this content, they click that button. 21,000 locations with obviously many more tablets, cell phones, and whatnot all receive their update simultaneously. Their previous publication cycle was about 90 days, including review cycle, including the print and ship. We've reduced that considerably. They can update as often as they like. It's now just a matter of how quickly can the review process actually go through whatever changes they're making. So, folks, any questions on kind of the review and author review and publication side before I jump to what I think is one of the more important ones, the analytics piece?
I haven't seen any questions come through, Greg. And just to let you know, we're looking at about 12 minutes.
Yep. I'm keeping my eye on the clock as well. Thanks, Tim.
Okay.
So we'll go quickly over analytics. We provide a dashboard that is really designed to tell authors what's working, what's not, what are people looking at, what are they not. There's some additional information as far as what are people using to see this information, the exact distribution channels as well. But if I want to see, hey, what's most popular over the last 30 days, it's this page, followed by this page, followed by this page. And down below, we even go a little bit more granular, and we can get information like, the exact most popular page that folks are looking at in the system, what the average page views per users, number of page views, individual users, obviously just some simple math there. Conversely, we can also look at least viewed pages. So what's not getting hit? When you print and you hand this off, you lose all this visibility. So now if as an author I have limited resources as far as being impactful on changing content, maybe I focus on these sorts of pages at the top of this list. Or conversely, maybe I try to figure out why these aren't working. Why aren't people using these particular pages? Forgive the demo data. We don't actually collect information on our customers as far as what their assets are being used or how their assets are being used. So this is just a little bit of information out of one of our demo assets that we see here. So folks, I'll keep going on the presentation. What we've just done is we've really taken a look at how Starbucks is using the Inkling solution, right? From content creation, distribution, measurement, everything is self-contained within the platform. And this is allowing Starbucks to easily create beautiful interactive content for both their employees and their customers who are coming into the stores. We saw that small set of potential data, but suffice it to say that every click, every page call, any sort of interaction with our system is being tracked. So quiz results, content utilization, whatever you actually need out of the system, we can provide. It's one of the most advanced, basically web logs that I've seen in a while. We're tracking absolutely everything. And of course, on top of that, we're also regularly integrating with LMS solutions, so that should you need those quizzes to be tracked and the results be passed back for testing purposes and reporting purposes, we can certainly do that. So I'll conclude with kind of the four big benefits that the companies we work with are trying to achieve. First off, customers' current process is likely both slow and expensive. Hopefully y'all saw that we make the authoring, review, and publication process considerably more efficient than what most organizations are used to. Secondly, because we're controlling how this content is in fact distributed, we didn't cover it too much, but we have some great digital rights management capabilities that can control assets that you're publishing out to your employees. This is a huge deal for customers where either they're differentiating on the actual processes that they have internally, and it stops things like, hey, I just handed a printed binder over to somebody. Their brother-in-law works at a competitor. He's going to Kinko's, making a copy, and then handing it over. This can be much more controlled. We can stop people from printing, stop people from downloading, all sorts of cool things. Analytics-wise, with every click, every call to our database being tracked, we can see exactly how content's being used, what's effective, what's being ignored, things like that. And hopefully our focus on mobility has come across at this point. Most solutions that our customers have they're pre-cloud, they're pre-mobile, and trying to shoehorn that to work on mobile devices is far too expensive and time-consuming to make sense. And again, I think one of the coolest aspects is that we do all of this with a single piece of software, and that's up and running, including configuration and templating in just a few days. So with that, let me turn this over again to any questions. And Ken, is there anything else you'd like me to cover before we conclude, sir?
Yeah, I heard you mention LMS. How does Inkling integrate with that, or how is Inkling related to LMS or learning management system?
Yeah. So we have a number of different integrations that we can do. We do have the ability of basically being the authoring tool for content that can be pushed into an LMS. So we have a SCORM export capability. There's some pros and cons associated with this process. As we do publish that, we lose the digital rights management capability. Basically, we become an asset that is now kind of within the wrapper of that LMS. So if that LMS is not overly mobile friendly, we lose that functionality as well. We also lose any sort of analytics from our side. Now, most LMSs can track pretty well what people are doing, what they're looking at, how long they're on a page, so it's not a big deal. But it's now outside of the authoring environment. So an author goes to the LMS, looks at those reports, and then comes back into Inkling for the authoring experience. I think a better utilization is actually to allow for the tracking of test results in an LMS, but have the content authored, distributed, and consumed off the Inkling platform. So if we go back to kind of like what we just saw with Starbucks when they have that multiple choice question on the end, if Greg Ryan logged in on the 21st of May at 12:45 p.m. Central Time, answered that question twice, first time was wrong, second time was right, that result can be sent to the LMS and associated with my user profile there, and of course all the other questions that I've answered. By doing that, you're still tracking progress and test scores and by proxy retention of content through the LMS, where most trainers are going to be comfortable. But we're still providing kind of that closed loop feedback of, hey, the Earl Grey white tea page is being used over and over again, as I kind of default to that in my demo environments, whereas other pages are not being used. And that's valuable information and insight for your folks who are actually generating and improving upon this content. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes. And what about mobile platforms? I'm assuming Inkling works with all different mobile platforms, or are there some that are limited?
So we have, again, it kind of depends on what you mean by mobile platform, but as far as pushing this content into an application on a mobile phone or a tablet device, that's a super simple use case for us. By the sheer fact that we're initially designed for mobility, we play well with other mobile applications. We can have our content displayed as a portion within those apps. We can have our content basically stripped of formatting and just have kind of a structured file that then is being ingested and redisplayed. I mean, there's no limit to that sort of integration. I think where we get a little bit of a limitation is when we start trying to integrate with on-premise applications that are behind firewalls. That's really the only place where I've seen this be a challenge. If you're dealing with things that are cloud, if you're dealing with things that are mobile, it's second nature to us. It's only when we have to start working with security teams to figure out how we can get content from our servers internal on their networks. That's the only real challenge. And more often than not, the answer there is do an export of some sort and allow them to ingest that and then display it however they see fit.
Okay. Now, what about existing content? Are you able to, like, if we had something, could we at least get it imported somehow and then manipulate it from there?
Yep. So we have some import capabilities. Depending on how structured the content that you have that's pre-existing is, it can be a very simple process, automated import, and then kind of a go back and just make sure everything looks good. If it's relatively unstructured, we also have third-party partners that will ingest content for extremely low rates. These are generally outsourced shops that are basically having folks go in and either copy and paste manually, or kind of go back and do the tweaking on format and whatnot. What we generally find, though, is that because previous content is designed for print or designed for kind of a flatter delivery, that content can exist separately. It could be stored in ECM or something along those lines. And content from this point going forward has that kind of elevated experience, the interactivity, the quizzes, the slideshows, videos, things like that. And they just kind of live separate but still maintained, if that makes sense. But totally open to pulling content in. We have, especially like textbook companies, we've had people pull in hundreds of thousands, millions of pages worth of content. I wish I could say that was a simple process, but it's one that's certainly doable. We'll put it that way.
Great. Well, thank you. I don't see any other questions. I don't know if you have any closing comments for anybody, Greg. I know Justin put out information to the group that they can email him with any additional questions or requests. Thanks for sharing that, Justin.
I think just from our side, thank you all so much for the time. Hopefully this was somewhat insightful, above and beyond just the what it is that our organization provides. We're excited to be kind of part of what we see as an interesting time with regard to both the mobility and the utilization of knowledge and information. It's just a cool time to be in this sort of a space.
All right. Well, thank you, Inkling, and thank you, Greg and Justin, for working and sharing with our group today. Thanks, everybody, for attending the webinar. Make sure you check the tdhouston.org website for more information about ATD Houston. A couple of the events that will be coming up shortly. The next general meeting for the chapter is June 9th. And it's actually going to be a party, the chapter anniversary party, and also recap from the group that was at the International ATD conference the last few days. If you've been watching Facebook, you saw that they were having a lot of fun, a lot of great photos posted there of some of the activities they were involved with. So look forward to hearing that and hopefully seeing a bunch of you there. And then also don't forget in September, we have the big Talent Development and Dynamic Times conference, the ATD Houston Fall Conference, September 24th. So find more information at tdhouston.org. And thanks again for everybody for joining us. Have a great day.